Have you ever had the time when you made a commitment to do something, and then after you've done that, things change? So the one you had originally intended didn't seem right. Have you ever had that happen? It's kind of like naming the baby before the baby's born. That happened to me years ago. My first child was about to be born. And you have to understand that in my dad's family, there had not been a girl born in 97 years. There had not been a girl who survived infancy in over 150. So I draw the very natural conclusion, I needed a boy's name. Well, that was cool. I had a boy's name. We were all set to go. And then, lo and behold, we had a girl. Not only that, but at this stage of my life, I look back and you know what I've got? I've got 4 daughters, an adopted son, and 2 stepdaughters. Which kind of shows you that the Spirit can have a bizarre, twisted sense of humor every once in a while. I'd also like to take this time just to say, I can't tell you how much I appreciate those times that I've been invited over here. It's not on? I'm just not saying anything worthwhile. Get used to that. I really appreciate the times that I've been here to worship with you. Both when I've been here as a preacher and those times when I've just sat in the pew. It's like coming home. I cannot tell you how comfortable I feel. So, you see the sermon title in the bulletin. That's what I was thinking about as my sermon theme on Tuesday. This is not Tuesday. You may not have noticed that, but things change. So I'm putting you on notice now. Do not expect me to be saying much about the energizing spirit this morning, although I will be speaking about the Spirit. But first, the second reading, which comes to us from the book of Acts. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly, from heaven, there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? How is it that we hear each of us in our own native language?" And there ends the reading. How many of you got up for their wedding yesterday? I did too. I hadn't intended to, but at 6 o'clock my wife was up and turned on the TV, and it kind of woke me, and I figured, well, as long as I'm awake, I might as well get up and get a cup of coffee. I don't know how you felt about it. I thought it was a stunning wedding. I heard this morning the preacher for the wedding, he went to college over in Hobart. How about that? One of our boys. And I liked his preaching. And it's because of some of the kinds of things that he said that my horizons for today kind of opened up some. And there's some kinds of things that I think that are important for us to take into account. And the first of them is, while I don't understand this Pentecost story, I do not deny that it may well have happened. But the difficulty for me is that all too often, if we get into it too much, what we begin to think is that there was no Holy Spirit before this. And I don't think that's true. I think the Holy Spirit was with God from the beginning of time. And if we want to see its power, then we can go into the Old Testament. We can read about how when the Hebrew children were escaping from Egypt, that God sent the wind, the Spirit, and moved the Red Sea apart so that they could walk through the sea on dry land. That's Spirit work. That's the powerful Spirit that can indeed move. But it's not the only kind. The Spirit speaks gently. The Spirit whispers. As a matter of fact, you know, I really have a feeling, suspicion, that the Spirit at our birth comes to visit us and dwell with us for our entire lives. And where I get that is from Genesis, when God scoops up the dirt of the ground, and I guess he spits on it to make it into mud so it'll hold together, and fashions it into a body and breathes into it. The word breath in Hebrew is the same word as spirit. So that when you and I were born and they brought us out and they gave us a swap on the keister to get us to take a first breath, and we inhale, we draw in the Spirit. And that Spirit stays with us. It's a part of who we are. Which also, you see, gives rise to that word of Scripture that we were looking at the other day, when, a week or so ago, when we said, we're children of God. Because we're children of God, we're heirs. That's a part of our identity. It's not a question of, well, if we're good enough, we can be. It's already given. We're children of the Spirit. How about that? Now, one of the things I'd like to say about that reading this morning, the Acts reading, is, and I get to that reading by, do you remember the Epistle of John, chapter 4? Where it is written, God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. So, if you want to know where God is, you look around and you see where love is. Because God is love. When the Spirit breathes, the Spirit is God. And the breath of the Spirit is love. Creative, life-giving, inventive. we're made of spirit. Now, I don't know how this worked on the day of Pentecost about all these people speaking. They're not speaking in tongues because they didn't need an interpreter. There's some folks who say this is a turning around of the Tower of Babel story in Genesis, when God came down and confused the language because human beings were getting too big for their britches. And if we don't watch out, they're going to imagine that they're gods. And this turns it around so that now, instead of being confused, everyone could clearly hear and understand what the message was. Okay? But the message is love. And love is its own language. Which reminds me of a time when my oldest child, you remember that's the first girl born, and she was 13 months old, and I had her with me when I had to go into a department store and make a purchase. And she wasn't walking yet, but boy, she could crawl so fast she could have won the Indiana 500. I mean, she could. And it was a summer day, I remember, because one of her favorite snacks in the summertime was to take a roll of Lifesavers. And she'd work at it and take the wrapper off. But her sweaty, warm little hands would cling those Lifesavers, would make them all cling together. So she had a stack of Lifesavers in her hand. I put her down on the floor with her Lifesavers, and she was trying to get the cherry one off the top. And I was starting to look at whatever it was that I was there to purchase. I can't even remember, that was so long ago. And then I turned around and she wasn't there. In a department store. In a strange city. I had no idea. Panic! And then I looked over, and about 2 aisles over, I saw there was a group of about 15 to 18 adults standing there looking down at the floor with smiles on their faces. And I said to myself, that's probably a pretty good place to start. And so I went over, and as I came around the corner, there she was. Nancy Elizabeth, with copper-colored curls that just bounced. Beautiful red cheeks, the color of apples that you just wanted to pluck. Sitting there on the floor, knees to knees, with a little Oriental girl of about the same age. And they were just smiling at each other. And then the little Oriental girl reached out and touched my daughter's curls. And my daughter giggled and reached down and touched the little girl's cheek. And she giggled. And then they opened up their arms to each other, and they leaned over and embraced each other and kissed each other on the cheek. And all of those adults standing there let out a collective sigh. Because, you see, they had just witnessed the universal language of love. Every one of them understood very clearly, without a word being spoken, that this was a sacred moment. Who is it? I think it's one of the saints who said, in everything preach the gospel, when necessary use words. But the good news of the gospel is best communicated without saying a word. It's when love is communicated. And to me, my friends, that's the miracle of Pentecost. That's the miracle of our being together. That's the wonder that we've been given to share with each other. That we are children of God who have the Spirit already breathed into us and has been there since birth and is ours to share and generate new life and understanding and laughter and wonder and joy and hope and possibility. It's a creative power that brings new things into being. And we are so gifted to be a part of that. You're going to be a while without a pastor. That's okay. You now have everything you need to make it work till a new pastor comes. You know what to do when you see people hungry. You feed them. You know what to do when you see people who are heartbroken. You comfort them. You know what to do when you see people who are strange. You welcome them in. You've got this spiritual gift that we have joyfully been given the opportunity to share. I know boys that need it. Along with that wedding that happened yesterday morning, that's brimming with hope. We also had news of another shooting in the school. How life-denying that is. A wedding that's life-giving, a shooting that's life-denying. But you and I have been gifted with the answer to that. It's an answer that transforms. It takes love into situations in which there is anger. It smooths it out so that there's peace. It takes love where there's despair. And it smooths it out so that a person in despair can begin to see possibilities that were invisible before. And we have the gifts to do that. Just as surely as if we were little 13-month-old kids crawling away to see if there isn't something around the corner where we could investigate. You and I can do that too. We don't need some hired help to tell us to do what we know in our hearts is right. It will give us peace and pleasure and hope. Because as we share those gifts with others, they're renewed in us.